Breaking news in the NFL Live is less than a week away from the start of the 2021 NFL Draft. A pair of AFC contenders made a major trade that has shaken up the back end of the first round. And who better to discuss this trade with than the man who broke the story himself? Good afternoon to you, Adam Schefter. What can you tell us about the AFC blockbuster?
Well, happy birthday to you, Field. And on your birthday, the Ravens and Chiefs completed a very significant deal that impacts Thursday night and the future of both franchises. The Baltimore Ravens trade Orlando Brown to Kansas City, along with a second-round pick this year and a sixth-round pick next year. And you see what the Ravens get back: 4 picks in return for Orlando Brown, which now means that the Baltimore Ravens will be picking twice on Thursday night, number 27 and number 31. They do have an added hole now along the offensive line, but as ESPN Baltimore reporter Jamison Hensley pointed out, they are likely to sign Alejandro Villanueva, the free agent offensive tackle formerly of the division rival Pittsburgh Steelers, some point after the draft when the free agents no longer count against the compensatory draft pick formula. And so the Ravens come away with the extra picks. They will have a hole to address here. Kansas City shores up its offensive line. You remember during the offseason, cutting Mitchell Schwartz, cutting Eric Fisher. Moving on, they now have somebody to help protect Patrick Mahomes' blind side in Orlando Brown. The Ravens get the picks, and these two sides have been going back and forth for a couple of days before they finally settled in on the formula that they agreed upon late this afternoon, Field.
You don't often see rivals make a trade, Shefty, but that speaks to the motivation from both sides. I know you're going to be back with us in just a little bit, so thanks for the insight, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
And thanks for making all of us a part of your Friday on NFL Live. As again, I mentioned, we're now just a week away, less than that actually, from the 2021 NFL Draft, and I'm joined by Mina Kimes and Damian Woody and Matt Miller. I'm Field Yates, in case you're wondering. We got the latest and everything you need to know about the countdown to Cleveland, but first, there was a huge trade, so Mina, you get first dibs here. What was your reaction when you saw this legitimate blockbuster between two teams competing for the AFC Championship next year?
I was surprised because they're competitors, as you said. We'll get to that from Baltimore's perspective. From Kansas City's perspective, obviously this was an area of need for them. I like it as a football move. I mean, a couple of months ago, we were all panicking about this Chiefs offensive line after the Super Bowl and after they cut their tackles. Now we're looking at Orlando Brown Jr., Joe Thuney, Austin Blythe, Duvernay Tardif, and or Kyle Long and Mike Remmers. They're in decent shape. Of course, Orlando Brown Jr. is going from the run-heaviest offense in football to the pass-heaviest, but he did play left tackle for Oklahoma, so he's played in that kind of offense before. This is a great move for him, Field, because he's got a ton of leverage going into, the end of his rookie deal. But Kansas City, look, they're not worried about that in future deals if this means they can go back to the Super Bowl this year. Now, from Baltimore's perspective, it's a nice return given that Orlando was nearing the end of his contract. But like I said, a little surprised they made the trade with the division rival. It did give them more ammunition, but if they end up facing Kansas City in the conference championship, they might have a little bit of regret.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a couple things that come to mind for me. Number one, great for Orlando Brown, because now he's going to get left tackle money. That's a big difference between right tackle and left tackle. So kudos to him for making that happen and playing so well last year. And also, from Kansas City perspective, we know that they're rebuilding their offensive line. And I think this speaks to the volume of, the depth at the tackle position in the draft. The Kansas City Chiefs probably felt, you know what, we're not going to mess around and try to get a guy that, we hope can develop to protect our prize and, our prize possession in Patrick Mahomes. We're going to go out here and get a more known commodity in Orlando Brown Jr., shore up that part of the offensive line so we can make sure that Patrick Mahomes doesn't suffer what happened in the Super Bowl last year against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, Damien, and everyone looks at this and says, oh my gosh, Kansas City gave up a first-round pick. You were not finding an offensive tackle of this caliber at pick number 31 overall. And what do we all do that Sunday night in February? Watching Mahomes get absolutely destroyed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It almost looked irresponsible at times to have him out there. They will have 5 likely new starters on that offensive line week 1 of the NFL season with this move. They're also getting younger. And as Mina pointed out, Orlando Brown Jr., 1 year left on his rookie deal. Next year, he can likely play under the franchise tag. So it's not that expensive to where it's so cost prohibitive. It's also a team, guys, They almost got Trent Williams in free agency until San Francisco said, we'll make you the highest paid left tackle in NFL history. So Brett Veach and Brent Tillis, his cap guru, they know what they're doing. And it's also a team that they haven't drafted that well. So you might as well trade this first-round pick for someone who is going to be an impact right out of the gate.
All right, so a lot of activity this offseason, Damian, for the Chiefs' offensive line. My question is pretty simply, is the offensive line fixed enough? Because, as you guys have all talked about, that Super Bowl was unforgettable offensive line play.
I think it is.
Yeah, I think
Damian,
this goes.
you tell us.
Go ahead, Mina. Go ahead, Mina.
I'm sorry. Yeah, anytime I can jump in front of an actual lineman. I think it is because we forget that it wasn't like the entire Kansas City offensive line evaporated at once. They suffered from injuries throughout the season, and Patrick Mahomes, being Patrick Mahomes, was able to Band-Aid over it. At the end of the year, we saw literally the worst case scenario for Kansas City, right? They had basically blown up the entire offensive line. But it wasn't like, it wasn't easy for Patrick all year. So all they need is just to be decent for him to be fun.
Yeah, listen, I agree with Mina in this particular situation. What we saw from the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line at the end of the year, particularly in the Super Bowl, was a worst case scenario. I mean, you're talking about, both of their tackles were out. The interior just wasn't up to snuff. So you look at the moves that the Kansas City Chiefs have made thus far on their offensive line. These moves are going to go a long way with Joe Thuney and obviously Orlando Brown Jr. and Kyle Long getting signed in free agency. They made a lot of moves to really bolster this offensive line. And Patrick Mahomes doesn't need 5 all-stars on the offensive line. He just needs decent protection for him to go out there and be the MVP that we all expect him to be.
So, Matt, now that they have their left tackle situation sorted out in Kansas City, understanding that Orlando Brown probably needs a new contract at some point, as you look towards the Chiefs' needs entering the second round, as they no longer have a first-round pick, what might be other areas for Brett Veach and his front office to address in the draft?
Yeah, they do have 2 second-round picks now that they get number 58 back from Baltimore. So I think they have to look at the wide receiver position, which may seem just like too many riches for Patrick Mahomes, but we have to remember, Sammy Watkins is gone. He's now a Baltimore Raven. Mecole Hardman, a second-round pick, has not really developed into that premier pass catcher. Travis Kelce is starting to get a little bit older. I don't know if that will actually slow him down or not, but they do need another wide receiver outside of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So I think one of these smaller, fast wide receivers, like Amari Rodgers from Clemson, Tutu Atwell from Louisville, those are definitely the type of players they've loved in the past. I have to throw Rondale Moore from Purdue in here, who, when he was a true freshman 3 years ago, was one of the best players in college football. Those are the type of electric wide receivers they could be looking at in round 2. And then on defense, they do have to address the corner position. I think they would like to add another pass rusher. Tano Passignon left in free agency after being a second-round pick. So they do still have plenty of needs to fill. Even though they were in back-to-back Super Bowls, this is actually a roster that does have some turnover that's happening right now.
Well, we have so much more to come on this trade because we haven't even got to one other half of it, which is Orlando Brown's former team, the Baltimore Ravens. Such an interesting trade with so many tentacles to that. Coming up a little bit later on here in the show on NFL Live. And speaking of coming up on NFL Live, we have so much more to get to, including Baker Mayfield being locked in for the 2022 NFL season as the Browns are picking up his 5th-year option. Where does Cleveland fall in the division now? We debate that next. Plus, all signs point to the Jets taking Zach Wilson at number 2. What does head coach Robert Saleh have to say on starting a rookie quarterback? That's next. Stick with us.